Okay, so it's been a long time coming, but we are finally ready to put our finishing touches on our top-down shooter. And since we pretty much got everything else working, the one thing that we are missing with a game like this that we want to add are enemies that come in waves. And it's actually not very hard to do, so the challenge ends up being with a program like Construct 2, just figuring it out. And it can be easier said than done. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add global variables for the two properties that our waves are going to have. So if I think about a wave of enemy, I want to keep track of how many waves I'm going to allow come in before I either level up or I win the game. So I need a global variable for that, and I'm going to call that one wave. And that just keeps track of the number of waves that we have already, or the number of wave that we're on. So we start with wave 1, we go to wave 2, wave 3, so on and so forth. So I'm going to start with wave 1, and that's going to be my global variable for that. The other thing we need to do is keep track of the size of each of the waves, or how many enemies are going to be generated during each wave. So I will call this one wave size, and we'll default that one to 0. So now that we've done that, we're going to have to think practically about how we're going to generate our monsters. And as it stands, we have a bunch of monsters already laid into our layout. We want to fix this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all these monsters, in fact, except for the last one. So you actually have to leave one monster on the layout in order to be able to generate new ones. So I'll go ahead and do that. Actually, I'll keep that guy alive, and I'll just hit the delete button and delete the rest. And after some careful thinking, I've decided that instead of having monsters preloaded as the level starts, I'm going to want to generate new monsters and a certain number of monsters at random locations as an event happens. So I want something to trigger when monsters get generated. And what I'd like to do is have a certain number of monsters get generated, and I want them to be generated in random spots all throughout the layout, and then actually about 2 seconds apart, I figured out, is what worked well for my gameplay on this one. So that part of it is a little bit difficult to set up in Construct 2. What you would think you would do is set up something like a while loop or a for loop and set a wave size and then generate the random monsters as in a loop and have them over and over again until we reach the right number of monsters and all the monsters are generated, and set up a wait time for 2 seconds in between. So here's how I had set it up before, and it doesn't really work. So what I thought I was going to do is I would do like a for loop and go from, and you can call it whatever, and I can go like, say, from 1 to 10, and each time, and then I add the monsters. That way I can add a wait time in here, and we'll wait 2 seconds in between, and then I can create a monster through the system. But that actually doesn't work with the wait times. So for some reason, the wait times, or anything you do to try and add a 2 second wait inside of a loop, actually makes Construct just take a big crap on itself and not actually work. So what I figured out, and it took some planning and some trial and error, is we have to start with an every 2 seconds. So I'm going to say every X seconds, and then I'm going to make it 2 seconds, and every 2 seconds, and then I'm going to add a sub condition here. So I'll right click on the outermost part of this event, and I'm going to add a sub event, and that sub event is, I'm going to compare a variable, and the variable this time is going to be wave size. And as long as that is greater than 0, I'm going to continue with this action here. So the action I'm going to add is I'm going to first wait. And for some reason, when I use the every 2 seconds, or actually I don't need to add the wait, I can do and create. Let's see, I can do create object, and I'll create a monster, and I'll put that on layer 1. And I want to put this at a random location. Random locations are pretty tricky in Construct 2 because it has a JavaScript base. So since the background of all this is going to be JavaScript, you have access to this method here called random that generates a random number. The problem is that the random number generated is somewhere between 0 and 1, and it's a decimal number. It's some weird thing. And then so whatever you put in here for your range, it's going to be a decimal version of that and not the actual real number. So what you want to do is for X, I know that my layout is 2000 pixels wide, and so I want to give my random number anywhere in that range. So what I want to do is turn that random number into an integer, and the way I do that is by casting to what's called int. And int is what is a way of, it's a data type in JavaScript that's going to allow you to only have an integer and no decimal data. So it basically throws all the decimal data away and just gives us a nice solid even rounded off number that we can use for a location within our layout. So I'm going to cast it to int, and I'm going to say random, and I'm going to give it a range of 2000. So that's what I'm going to do there. And then I'm going to also, I know I'm 1000 pixels high on my layout size. So it's just a random between, anywhere between that 2000 by 1000 range. I'm putting it on layer 4, and I'm creating a monster. So that's pretty much it. Every 2 seconds, I'm going to create a monster, and I'm going to do that as long as wave size is greater than 0. And then each time I create a monster, I'm going to subtract 1 from the wave size. Let's see, I'm going to click done. So I'm going to subtract 1 from wave size. So let's say I set my, instead of, let's say 0 here, I'm going to set my wave size to 10. And then if I scroll down here, that should be probably pretty much good. So let's go ahead and play that and see how it works. So I'm going to wait around for my monsters here. And one big thing that you're going to notice is that my monsters are red right off the bat. But you can tell that I am getting monsters once every couple of seconds, which is good. But then the prevailing issue here is that I get 11 monsters because my wave's over, but you can see from my points that I've shot 11 monsters. So that's not really ideal, and I'll explain to you why that's happening. I don't like having my monsters red right off the bat. I want them to look normal, and I only want them to turn red when I shoot them. The problem is that I remember had the monsters all populated throughout this layout, and I was disabling the tint effect on the start of the layout. The problem with that is my monsters are no longer being created on the start of the layout. They're being created here. So I actually have to copy and paste that disable tint inside here right after I create each monster. Now I'm going to leave this disable tint effect here because if you remember, I already have one monster in my layout. The other thing that I have a problem with is that I have 11 monsters. I don't want 11 monsters, and I can't do anything about the fact that I have to have this monster in here when the layout starts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my wave size to 9. And so we can try that out as much as you want. Like we can maybe, change it to 3 or 4. Let's go ahead and change this to a 3, and you can see I'll get more monsters. So we go back to our layout and I play this. Let's see, I can find all the monsters. Stuck at a solid even 3. No. Sorry, 4 monsters. So basically, the concept is whatever number you want, since you already have one monster present in your layout, you just put for the wave size 1 less than what you want. So like before, when I wanted a wave size of 10, if I would have put 9 here instead of 10, I would have gotten 10 monsters. So that's how we set up our first wave of monsters. In the next couple of videos, what we're going to do is we're going to set up some ending screens for all of our waves and a beginning screen for our waves. And we're also going to make multiple different waves, changing the wave size and the amount of enemies that we get with each wave. And I'll show you how to do that on the next couple of videos.